All right, let's dive into something really interesting today. The decline of Japan's auto industry.
Yeah.
And we're going to use Nissan as a case study. That analyze, potential mergers and acquisitions. One focusing on Honda and Nissan, and then the other one looking at the possible acquisition of Nissan by Foxconn.
Interesting.
Right. So our mission today is to understand what is driving Nissan's decline,
Yeah.
the role of China's auto industry boom in all of this, and then just the overall future of Japan's auto industry.
I think what's fascinating here is that Nissan's struggles are almost like a canary in the coal mine. They're signaling some deeper issues within Japan's auto sector as a whole.
It does feel like Nissan's kind of at a crossroads right now. They've been posting consistent losses since 2020, even leading to a 9,000-person layoff back in 2023. Like, what's going on?
Well, the popular narrative is that it's, China's rise. But I think that's kind of an oversimplification. While China's influence is undeniable, I think Nissan's internal struggles are a significant factor. For example, their sales figures paint a pretty grim picture. They saw a 10.53% drop in sales in China from January to November 2024, and a 7.7% drop in North America in the first 10 months of 2024.
Wow, that's steep. And, I've always kind of felt like Nissan's been a little bit conservative in their approach to product development, and even like management. They just seem to be lagging behind in innovation compared to some of their competitors.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And to understand this, quote-unquote conservative approach, I think we have to look at the Ghosn saga. Carlos Ghosn was their former CEO. He played a crucial role in reviving Nissan back in the early 2000s. But his arrest in 2018 and subsequent escape from Japan in 2019 created this massive leadership void and really exposed some deep-rooted, cultural and operational issues within the company. It's almost like the company was shaken to its core and hasn't fully recovered.
Right. So you've got these internal challenges that Nissan was already facing, and then this leadership crisis on top of it. But at the same time, China's auto industry is undergoing this incredible boom.
Right.
Especially with electric vehicles.
Exactly. And this brings us to, the question of, did China's rapid growth overturn Japan's auto industry? And I think the answer is a little complex, but I think the impact of China's rise is undeniable.
Yeah. One of the videos we're looking at today uses the term destructive disruption to describe what's happening in China's EV industry.
Right.
That sounds intense.
It is. Think about this. In October 2024, nearly 70% of global EV sales came from China. They also hold over 70% of the global EV battery market share. So this disruption, it's not just about car sales, it's about the entire ecosystem.
Right. They've essentially just established dominance in that entire EV supply chain.
Yeah.
So that's got to be putting a ton of pressure on traditional automakers like Nissan.
Absolutely. China has taken the lead in key EV components like, batteries, cathodes, anodes, separators, electrolytes. They've built this, vertically integrated supply chain. That's really left companies like Nissan scrambling to catch up. And this has really challenged, Japan's traditional strengths in areas like electric motors and electronic control systems.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that because I just had the chance to test drive a Chinese EV recently. And honestly, the technology was mind-blowing. The in-car experience and the autonomous driving features were so far superior to what I've seen in, most Japanese cars. It seems like they're really falling behind in those areas.
Yeah, that's the reality now. Japanese automakers are no longer the undisputed leaders in, those kinds of technological advancements. But, let's dig a little deeper into why that is. I think there are two key issues at play here. First, Japan has been really slow to adapt to both EV and digital trends. Yes, Nissan was an early mover with the Leaf, but they failed to scale up production and keep pace with the innovation happening elsewhere. It's almost like they tested the waters, but they never fully committed.
It's interesting, right? Because you have companies like Tesla that came in and completely proved the viability of EVs, iterated really rapidly on their products, developed strong software capabilities, and just superior electric drivetrains. And then you have, companies like Toyota and Honda that initially dismissed EVs altogether.
Right. And that initial hesitation really highlights, I think, the industry's sluggish response to this, changing market. But there's another key factor here, which is Japan's Keiretsu system. It's basically this network of interlocking corporate relationships. And historically, it's provided stability and minimized, cutthroat competition. But there's a downside to the system as well.
It sounds like a double-edged sword. How so?
Well, this system also breeds slow decision-making, a resistance to structural change, and a preference for, maintaining existing relationships over embracing new ideas. It's like they're stuck in this, comfortable but ultimately unsustainable way of doing business.
Right, so they're prioritizing stability over agility.
Yeah,
And in a rapidly changing market, that can be a recipe for disaster.
absolutely. And I think we see this playing out, the proposed Honda-Nissan merger. It feels more like a kind of a desperate attempt by these two struggling giants to prop each other up, rather than, a strategic move driven by a shared vision for the future. And this raises the question, what does the future hold for Japan's auto industry as a whole?
Well, the picture painted in these videos is pretty bleak. I mean, one of them compares Japan's auto industry to fallen tech giants like Nokia, Motorola, BlackBerry. Companies that failed to adapt to new technological ways.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty unsettling comparison.
It is. And even, Carlos Ghosn himself has expressed skepticism about the Honda-Nissan merger, highlighting a lack of synergy and the potential for conflict due to their overlapping product lines and market positioning.
Wow, so even someone who knows the industry inside and out isn't really convinced that this merger is the right move. I mean, is there any reason to be optimistic about the future of Japan's auto industry?
That's a good question. I think in order to answer that, we need to delve into the potential outcomes. And we can explore that further after the break.
Yeah, so, to understand those potential outcomes, I think we need to look at these specific scenarios being discussed. One is a potential acquisition of Nissan by Foxconn, which is, the Taiwanese electronics giant.
Yeah.
Known for manufacturing iPhones. Their interest seems to stem from a desire to control the entire manufacturing process, from design to production. And they've already made some moves into the EV market, showcasing concept cars, partnering with, other automakers. But didn't Foxconn have kind of a rough go of it with their acquisition of Sharp a few years back? Wouldn't that make them hesitant to kind of jump into such a complex industry like automobiles?
Yeah, that's a valid concern. Integrating a company with a completely different culture and expertise is no easy feat. And the auto industry is far more intricate than, consumer electronics. I mean, Foxconn's strength lies in high-volume, standardized manufacturing. Cars, on the other hand, require a different approach. They're complex machines with intricate supply chains and a much higher degree of customization.
Not to mention Nissan has like a long history and a very strong brand identity. Would Foxconn even want to preserve that? Or would they try to mold Nissan into something completely different?
That's the million-dollar question. Their ultimate goal might be to leverage Nissan's manufacturing capabilities and their existing dealer networks to produce their own vehicles, essentially using Nissan as a platform for their own ambition.
Right, so it's not really about revitalizing Nissan. It's about kind of absorbing them and using their assets for their own gain. Okay, so what about the other scenario? The potential merger with Honda. What are the driving forces behind that? And what are the potential pitfalls?
Well, in the case of Honda, I think the motivation seems to be pooling resources, to become a more competitive force on the global stage. They're hoping that by, combining their strengths, they can better tackle the challenges ahead.
But we talked about how both companies kind of have overlapping product lines. And they're both struggling to adapt to, the EV revolution. So wouldn't a merger just create a bigger, slower-moving behemoth?
I mean, that's the inherent risk, right? Mergers are notoriously difficult to execute successfully, especially in industries that are undergoing rapid transformation. And there's also, the lack of a clear strategic vision. Even Carlos Ghosn has expressed skepticism, arguing that, both companies lack a compelling narrative for why this merger even makes sense.
It's almost like they're clinging to each other out of fear, rather than moving forward with a bold plan for the future. It seems like they're missing a core understanding of what's really driving this shift in, the auto industry.
And this brings us back to, I think, the larger question we've been exploring. Did China's rapid growth overturn Japan's auto industry?
It seems like China's success in EVs definitely exposed some, deep-seated vulnerabilities in Japan's approach. But, were those vulnerabilities already there?
Exactly. It's not as simple as saying China single-handedly caused Japan's decline. However, China's aggressive push into EVs acted as a catalyst, revealing the cracks that were already present in Japan's auto industry. Their slow adaptation to EV trends, their rigid keiretsu system, their failure to anticipate market shifts, all of these things contributed to their current predicament.
It's almost like they were standing still while the rest of the world was moving forward, and now they're just struggling to catch up.
That's a good way to put it. And this story has implications that extend beyond just the auto industry.
What do you mean?
Well, I think Japan's struggles mirror the challenges faced by many mature economies that are grappling with technological disruption. I mean, this is a story that resonates across industries and countries. What we're seeing in Japan's auto industry is really a microcosm of a much larger global phenomenon.
Yeah, that's a sobering thought. It seems like the stakes are even higher than we initially thought. So what are some of the key takeaways from all of this? What can we learn from Japan's experience?
Well, I think one of the most important lessons is the importance of adaptability. The pace of technological change is accelerating, and companies that cling to the status quo risk being left behind.
It's fascinating how this deep dive into Nissan has kind of unveiled so much about the global auto industry and the challenges of adapting to rapid change.
It really underscores how interconnected our world is. What happens in one industry, in one country, can have ripple effects across the globe.
We've talked about Nissan's financial struggles, the rise of China's auto industry, and these systemic issues within Japan's auto sector. But I keep thinking about the human element. We discussed that concept of Shitamachi Tishi, where entire towns are built around a single industry. What happens to those communities if that industry declines or disappears?
That's a critical aspect of the story that often gets overlooked. It's a complex issue with no easy answers. Some argued that these communities need to diversify, to embrace new industries, and adapt to the changing economic landscape. But that's much easier said than done.
Right, because these towns have generations of skilled workers whose expertise might not easily transfer to other fields. Plus, there's the infrastructure that's been built up around a specific industry. It's not like you could just flip a switch and transform a car manufacturing town into a tech hub overnight.
Exactly. And that's where government policies and support become crucial, investing in retraining programs, attracting new businesses, providing social safety nets. All of that can help ease the transition for these communities.
It's about recognizing that economic disruption creates winners and losers. And it's about providing support for those who are left behind. And this kind of brings me to a question that's been on my mind throughout this whole deep dive. Why should our listener care about the fate of a Japanese automaker? What's the broader relevance of this story?
That's a good question. And I think the answer is that this story is much bigger than just one company or one country. It's a glimpse into the future of mobility, the global power dynamics shaping industries, and the ethical considerations of technological disruption.
Yeah, the decisions that these companies are making, the trends that we're seeing in the auto industry, they have implications for all of us. Think about the cars we drive, the technologies we use, and the jobs that sustain our communities. They're all connected to these global forces that we've been discussing.
Right. It's a reminder that we live in a constantly evolving world, and we need to be prepared to adapt, to learn, and to make informed choices as consumers, citizens, and even investors.
So what's the final verdict on Japan's auto industry? Is there any hope for a comeback?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a lost cause, but they definitely have a steep climb ahead. They need a fundamental shift in mindset. They need to embrace the EV revolution fully, shed their conservative approach, and foster a true culture of innovation.
Stop looking back at past glories and start looking forward to the possibilities of the future. It sounds like they need a pretty dramatic transformation.
They do, and they also need to address the social and economic consequences of this transition, ensuring that their workers and communities aren't left behind. If they can do all of that, maybe, just maybe, this period of decline will spark a new era of Japanese automotive ingenuity.
It's a challenge, but it's not insurmountable. Well, we've reached the end of our deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground today. From Nissan's financial troubles to China's disruptive rise, from the intricacies of the Keiretsu system to the broader implications for the global economy.
We hope this deep dive has given you some valuable insights into the forces shaping the auto industry and the challenges of adapting to a rapidly changing world.
This is just the beginning of the conversation. What are your thoughts on the future of Japan's auto industry? What strategies do you think Japanese companies should adopt? Share your thoughts. Keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep driving deep.
Yeah, it's fascinating how, this deep dive into Nissan has unveiled so much about the global auto industry and the challenges of adapting to rapid change.
Absolutely, and it really just underscores how interconnected our world is. What happens in one industry in one country, it can have these ripple effects across the globe.
We've talked about, Nissan's financial struggles, the rise of China's auto industry, and those systemic issues within Japan's auto sector. But I keep thinking about the human element. We discussed that concept of Shitamachi Teifi, where entire towns are built around a single industry. So what happens to those communities if that industry declines or disappears? That's a critical aspect of this story that I think often gets overlooked. It's a complex issue. There's no easy answers. Some argue that these communities need to diversify, embrace new industries, and kind of adapt to, that changing economic landscape. But that's much easier said than done.
Right, because these towns have generations of skilled workers.
Whose expertise might not, easily transfer to other fields. Plus, there's the infrastructure that's been built up around a specific industry. It's not like you can just flip a switch and transform a car manufacturing town into like a tech hub overnight.
Exactly, and that's where government policies and support become so crucial. Investing in retraining programs, attracting new businesses, providing social safety nets can really help ease the transition for these communities.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that economic disruption, creates winners and losers. And it's about providing support.
For those who are left behind, this kind of brings me to a question that's been on my mind. Throughout this entire deep dive, why should our listeners care about the fate of a Japanese automaker? What's the broader relevance of this whole story?
That's a great question. And I think the answer is that this story is much bigger than just one company or one country. It's really a glimpse into the future of mobility, the global power dynamics that are shaping industries, and the ethical considerations of technological disruption.
The decisions that these companies are making, the trends that we're seeing in the auto industry, they have implications for all of us. Like, think about the cars we drive, the technologies we use, the jobs that sustain our communities. They're all connected to these global forces that we've been discussing.
Right. It's a reminder that we live in a constantly evolving world, and we need to be prepared to adapt, to learn, and to make informed choices as consumers, citizens, and even as investors.
So what's the final verdict on Japan's auto industry? Is there any hope for a comeback?
I wouldn't say it's a lost cause,
Yeah.
but they definitely have a steep climb ahead. They need a fundamental shift in mindset. They need to embrace the EV revolution fully, shed their conservative approach, and foster a true culture of innovation.
Stop looking back at past glories and start looking forward to the possibilities of the future. It sounds like they need a pretty dramatic transformation.
They do. And they also need to address the social and economic consequences of this transition. Ensure that their workers and communities aren't left behind. If they can do all of that, maybe, just maybe, this period of decline will spark a new era of, Japanese automotive ingenuity.
It's a challenge, but it's not insurmountable.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for our deep dive today. I feel like we covered a lot of ground, from Nissan's financial troubles to China's disruptive rise, from the intricacies of the Keiretsu system to the broader implications for the global economy.
Yeah, we covered a lot. We hope this deep dive has given you some valuable insights into the forces shaping the auto industry and the challenges of adapting to a rapidly changing world.
It's a lot to think about, but this is just the beginning of the conversation. What are your thoughts on the future of Japan's auto industry? What strategies do you think Japanese companies should adopt to navigate these challenges? We want to hear from you. Share your thoughts online and keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.